Hello. Let me just double check the sound is working. Hopefully it is.
Hi, Marcus.
Hi, Ben. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. Good evening, everybody. So we've got 65 people on already, which is amazing. If somebody could just write in the chat that they can hear us, that would be brilliant, just so we don't start giving away some golden nuggets before. Oh, yes, brilliant, awesome, loud and clear, brilliant. Okay, we'll give it a few minutes just to make sure that we give everybody a chance to attend. 69, we can actually host up to 100 in here, so hopefully we don't spill over that. If we do, we'll stream it live on the Facebook page as well for anybody that can't come on, but hopefully, yeah, we won't spill over above 100. I hope everybody is well. I hope everybody's safe. I hope schools aren't too stressful and everybody's doing okay. Children are enjoying the time that they're in schools, the ones that are in. And yeah, I suppose whilst we're waiting a couple of minutes, we'll just give a bit of an overview on what we've been doing the past few weeks. We've got our coaches that are out and about still delivering to those key worker children, and following the safe practice guidelines that we'll touch upon this evening. We've been in regular dialogue with them, finding out about what types of activities they're delivering, what type of activities that we'd like them to deliver, but equally it's a team effort, and those guys have been fantastic. Our team have been absolutely wonderful during this period, and we're very proud to have them working for us. And I know our schools have been really appreciative of the sessions that they've been delivering. And as I'm sure everybody who's listening in now would agree with, the children being outside in this lovely weather makes such a massive difference to everybody's mental health, and also getting that physical activity in is vital, especially given that some children just haven't been able to exercise and out and about. So yeah, it's tricky times for sure. Okay, we're creeping up. Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks everybody for commenting that you can all hear. That's brilliant. Any issues throughout, please just give us a shout in the chat. We will try and keep track of it throughout the webinar. Any questions you may have during as well, please fire them into the chat, or there is a Q&A box as well. So we'll try and check that regularly, and then certainly at the end, if we haven't answered questions during the webinar, we will come back to them at the end, and we'll try and go through as many as we can. If we do miss any, I apologise. We'll hopefully be able to answer all the questions that get asked this evening, and hopefully we'll be able to give you some practical advice and some good guidance that you can take away to your schools to help children in those final 7 weeks in term 6, get them active as we can, and make it as enjoyable as we can as well. I think that's the key thing. Okay, I think we'll make a start, because the first few slides are us introducing ourselves anyway, so people aren't going to miss hugely important stuff right at the beginning. Got a question ready. Here, look at this. Ollie loved the question last time. Hi, Ollie. Hope you're well. Good evening to you. Okay. Yeah, we'll what I'll do, Ollie, hopefully we'll touch on that throughout. If I haven't answered that question at the end, please just write in there again that you'd like a bit more information. But there is a slide detailed to sort of no equipment outdoor activities, just trying to cater to everybody's requirements. The government guidance is open to interpretation to an extent. So we're given, during these slides, we'll give some examples on with minimal equipment, with no equipment, with like a circulation and rotation of equipment. And then as a school, you can choose whichever one suits you. Obviously, every head teacher is going to be different in terms of what they want to do at their schools. Marcus and I are based in Somerset, so we are relatively fortunate that we haven't had the coronavirus badly down here. Obviously, it has touched us down here, but not anywhere near as bad as cities. So the advice is the same across the whole country, but it might be interpreted differently depending on where you are and the risks associated in your kind of area. Okay, let's get the slides up. I think I've cracked how to get the sound on. Hopefully it'll work. Apart from, that's the last slide. Here we go. Okay, so bear with me if questions are answered. I can see them, but not easily. So Marcus, I don't know if you can, but that'd be great if you could keep an eye on that. If not, I'll try and look at it at sort of intervals throughout speaking.
Yeah, sure. And Ben, I'm more than happy to answer some questions as you go as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Marcus. Brilliant. Okay, we've got 86 people on, so that's great. Let's get started. So, yeah, obviously a very current topic with what schools are going through and what we're going through in society. So we thought we'd try and give as much information, value, guidance as possible this evening, and hopefully you can take some points and guidance away to your schools, and it will be of use going into that final term. So yeah, hopefully it's enjoyable. I'm sure it will be. So just thought I'd give you a little bit of information about Marcus and I. So my name is Ben Kirk. We're both the owners of Inspired Schools and Inspired Somerset. So I was a former secondary school PE teacher, and we started our coaching company back in 2013 when I came out of secondary school education. I've personally been in the education sector for around 14, 15 years, working in various capacities for our local sports partnership, Somerset Activity Sports Partnership, before then going into secondary school and then starting the coaching business, specifically in primary schools, although we have done a bit of work in secondaries. And then our Inspired Schools, which was formerly known as Inspired Playgrounds, was launched 3 years ago, around this sort of time, 3 years ago. And the reason for that was we noticed a real drop-off in physical activity levels and also physical literacy of the children coming in. So we came up with a program, Inspired Playgrounds, which we were known as back then, to raise activity levels of the children. So that's a bit about me. We're in 28 schools across Somerset doing coaching, and 61, I think, maybe a couple more than that now, Inspired schools across the country. So that's a bit about us. Marcus, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Just briefly, I suppose I've worked across all the sectors really. So within education, for the FA for 8 years as well, and through many community inclusion projects such as Somerset Rural Youth Project. I think one of the common kind of factors within all of the work that I've kind of taken part in is kind of engaging with all children and raising activity levels and kind of supporting children to want to potentially take up a new sport or an activity, but also keep them in the game or activity for their life, really, for their lifelong kind of activity levels and support. So yeah, 3 different sectors, but kind of really the theme's always been maintained and been the same.
Great, thanks, Marcus. Okay, let's dive into it straight away. So I thought I'd just highlight the problems right from the outset. The children, and that's not aimed at children specifically that they're a pain, but obviously that's probably the main issue that everybody's a little bit concerned about. How are we supposed to socially distance 4 and 5 year olds from each other? It's going to be difficult, and put them into a PE environment, that's going to be even harder, right, when you've got no strict areas that they have to sit behind a desk, and it's a little bit like herding cats at times, even the best PE teachers teaching EYFS. That's not to put a negative slant on this at the outset, but that's the problems that we've had highlighted to us from our schools that we work in. As I said there, EYFS year 1s arguably will pose more issues than year 6. And then we've got other things like equipment, space, activities. How can we make it fun? I've had a few emails off the back of the email that went out last night, just asking if they're exercising on their own with no equipment in their own space. Is that going to be fun? Yeah, and I completely agree. We have to try and make it fun. We don't want to switch children off to physical activity. We don't want to see it as a chore. And from my own experience, trying to get my two girls to exercise with me at the start of the lockdown when I was recording videos, they loved it to start with, but then it became a bit monotonous for them. So we just tried to think about how we could make it fun. So yeah, doing the same activities for the 7 weeks might get tiresome, but I suppose the main thing is they are exercising. But if we can make it fun, then absolutely. And also then giving people the tools so that they are confident to deliver. So teachers sometimes lack a bit of confidence delivering PE anyway, especially invasion games and gymnastics. So in these circumstances, when it's obviously very different, hopefully we can help build that confidence with a few easy ideas that schools can implement. I don't know if there's any other problems that I've missed there, Marcus, that you want to add to.
Sorry, I'm busy typing on some of the questions. No, there's not. I've missed those few bits. Just trying to get back to people, really. I think for me, really, the really big thing there is the confidence to deliver. I mean, we're all in the same boat, really, and there is a lot of uncertainty with regard to schools going back. But you know, schools haven't been shut. A lot of schools haven't been shut, and there's been some fantastic delivery already. And only today I seen a teacher delivering a great session whereby he had some chalks, enabled kind of children to go around the playground, spreading themselves out. Children were coming up with different ideas and activity stations with chalk, so creating target games, some hopping games, some skipping games, and then kind of children were able to go around those activities, try them out. But also kind of there was an element of some of the children becoming leaders as well. So a great idea for spreading activities out, but also engaging children to come up with their own as well. So just a kind of a live example that I've seen today online. So it is happening. There's lots of good stuff happening. I think for us being within the kind of PE sector and being a kind of really advocate of PE, I think the confidence to deliver is probably the most important bit. But with the fantastic weather that we've got at the moment, and actually that need for children to move, I think we're in not a great position, because it's obviously an unfortunate position that no one would want to be in. But actually, you know, the confidence to go out, have a go, don't worry about the technical element so much, but actually just get the kids moving and be a little bit brave to explore different ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we can relay that confidence to the rest of the staff at your schools, then that's going to be a massive thing to hopefully take away, not just from this evening, but to build up over the coming weeks. Okay, I'm not going to read this out, but this is just the guidance. And what I will do in the morning is I will email everybody off the back of this evening, and I'll put a link to the slides so that you can all download them if you want to, take them back to your school. And if you wanted to go into detail on this guidance, I'm sure you've all seen it anyway, but I just thought I'd highlight some of the key parts of it. It is a little bit contradicting in places, and I think if you get too bogged down in it, it becomes really daunting. So I'll just read the red bits out. So children who have limited opportunities to exercise should be encouraged to exert themselves physically, which is great, which is what we want. Making use of supervised non-touch running games within their group. So yeah, non-contact, non-touch. We're not tagging or anything like that. We can limit that, and we can reduce the risk associated with those things. So that's not a problem. Use outside space. So outdoor equipment should not be used, which I think it can be used, and we'll go into detail on that later, but we'll also give examples of no equipment PE as well. But then it says, unless it is appropriately cleaned between groups of children and young people using it, and groups do not use the same equipment simultaneously. As you'd all be aware, within the guidance of that bubble within that group, and trying to limit the equipment, the number of people that are interacting with that group. So that's the interpretation there. And I think we've got some good solutions later on different ways to tackle that and handle that. Okay, a few bits here. Do not play sports or games together. Again, as a broad term, I don't agree with that. I understand what they're saying. We don't want children playing basketball, football, rugby, contact sports, but there are adapted games that children can play where they're not interacting with other children, not tackling, they're not in physical contact with other children, and they're spaced out appropriately. Limit the amount of shared resources. Yeah, we've touched on that. Shared materials and surfaces should be cleaned and disinfected more frequently. Again, we can come up with some solutions for that. And then finally, that last bit I like, which kind of leads into the rest of it, where it says practical lessons can go ahead if equipment can be cleaned thoroughly, which again, I think it can. And as I said, we'll go into some examples of no equipment PE lessons, but if you do want to incorporate it, we'll give some examples of how to make that as safe as possible as well. Marcus is busy tapping away, so I won't interrupt them.
No, that's fine.
If you want to jump in at any time, just give me a shout. As I said, daunting. When I read that, and I'm sure there's lots of teachers out there that have read that and thought, God, what does that mean? I can't get my head around that. I've got other plates that I'm spinning. I don't want to get wrapped up in this PE and what I can do, what I can't do. So I get it. Yes, it's daunting, but I think we can simplify it, make it really practical, make it really easy and straightforward so that you can take the lessons back from this evening and go back with a bit more confidence to your school and say, yeah, we can do this, and this is what we're going to do. Because ultimately, there'll be a lot of teachers at your school that will want to be almost told what they can and can't do in their PE lessons. And hopefully we can get rid of that ambiguity this evening.
Can I just jump in there, Ben, as well? Just a thought, really, that obviously for some children, PE will be their thing. So the one thing that obviously is potentially their shining light within education is PE, and a little bit, of thought, especially for some of those year 6 children that have gone through the school, PE being their saving grace and something they've excelled at. It's a great opportunity for next term to get them involved, get them, coming up with ideas, get them leading some activities. Is it an opportunity for them to not take a lead, but really support what you're doing? Potentially some of those guys are going to have sort of 6-7 weeks left of primary school life, and I know for a fact that even myself, thinking back to primary school now, some of the things I remember most fondly are to do with activities, teams, games, and sport. So it's an opportunity really for those year 6s to potentially get involved with something that is their saving grace. It's the one thing. It's their trigger, which will kind of lead to that lifelong learning and keeping them within activity, really. So it's a great opportunity to really explore what we can do with the year 6s.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to finish on this page, really, I firmly believe it's possible to deliver PE and different types of PE as well. And as I've mentioned there, some children will be going into another 6 weeks after those 7 weeks of a sedentary lifestyle where they don't really get out and about much. So if we can inspire them, get them active during those 7 weeks, there might be 1 or 2 in our class or your class that will think, oh, I love that game of XYZ. I'm going to go and play. I want my mum and dad to play with me at home, or if they're allowed to socialise with friends outside of school. So like Marcus said about that lifelong learning, that's still the driver for me and what we have to try and achieve at the end of primary school life, that they make those healthy choices. So yeah, to finish on this, it is possible, and hopefully this is how. So this is sort of a broad range of solutions, and we'll go into each one in a bit more depth. And I'm sure, again, this is probably all stuff that you've already thought about, but just to clarify that it's along the right sort of lines, and yeah, a guidance to take back to school. So just some basic solutions here. So sanitize the station. So depending on the layout of your school, when children go out of the classroom into the playground or the field or wherever you're doing PE, or even in the hall, the opportunity to sanitize on the way to the PE lesson and the way back from the PE lesson. Equally, can that be done in drinks breaks as well? And Marcus already touched upon this, but forget learning in PE. But that isn't important at the moment. Great if you're a PE specialist and you can manage to weave in some learning points, etc., etc. But ultimately, this next 7 weeks will be about making it fun, making it accessible, and getting those children active. Breaking the groups down still further, probably more relevant to EYFS and year 1s. If you're lucky enough to have a TA in your class, I know some won't with staffing being stretched, but if you do, possibility to leave 7 or 8 in the classroom and almost deliver 2 hours of PE, an hour to those 7, 8, and an hour to the next 7, 8. I know that's a really small group size, but again, it's just another way of ensuring that children are spaced out. And equally, you've got a smaller audience to talk to. And if you are going to play some games with limited equipment, then it will help with that as well. Year 6s, possibly not as relevant, but again, it might well be if you wanted to go out and play some quick cricket and just one game of quick cricket or whatever it might be. But to break those groups down still further, I feel is just a real simple win if you do have that luxury of an additional member of staff in your classroom. Rotation of equipment, I won't go into that now. I'll go into that in detail in a second, and then we'll touch on the different types of activities, and there's a bit of a list towards the end. And again, if I go through it too quickly, I will send this out so you can download it, and it will be yours to keep. Okay, so moving on. Have a PE day. So if it is your class's PE that given day, especially year 1 and EYFS, could they come to school in their kit? So you're limiting that changing time. Some children may still need help getting changed, so you're limiting that contact with those children. And I think just from a hygiene point of view, if it is baking hot, you potentially would want children to get changed afterwards. But it might just be a solution whereby you haven't got sweaty PE kit that's strewn across the floor, and it could potentially become a bit of a mess in that child's zone. So again, it's a suggestion. It doesn't necessarily need to happen, but it's just one that we throw out there. And then rather than viewing PE as a specific lesson, could you just have regular breaks within the school day? So we did a webinar last week on hitting those 30 minutes every single school day, and weaving it in throughout the day at regular intervals is key to that. So have a PE lesson, but equally get the children active throughout the day as well. If it's not their PE day, still try and incorporate that in. There's loads of YouTube videos out there. Joe Wicks, obviously a little bit controversial in the PE world of his HIIT workouts, but his stuff obviously gets kids active, and some children do love it. And then you've got our Inspired 5, which I'll click on in a second just to show you what that is. And just after Marcus has added anything you want to add to that sort of page, Marcus?
No, I don't think so. I think, from my perspective, long term, some of our schools now have adopted the policy of children coming to school in a PE kit. And I know from an activity level time, it's probably double the amount of PE the children are having. I know there are potential things that does kind of bring up, such as, what if children forget their PE kit? But it is a kind of a whole school team effort, really. But the amount of activity time that has been kind of gained through children coming to school in their PE kits has been phenomenal, particularly with some of the younger classes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so our Inspired 5 project is, we built this with those learning breaks in mind and trying to help schools hit that 30-minute target, and encouraging the schools that join us to use these videos at regular intervals before school, potentially some yoga in the afternoon to bring everybody sort of down a little bit, or on one-to-one small group work. So just to give those activity boosters, brain breaks, etc. So this is what it looks like inside the platform. I'll click on one just so you can see it, and hopefully the sound will work. This is my favorite one. The sound didn't work. So Ollie was here. I know Ollie's in attendance. Hopefully this will work this evening, Ollie. I think you wanted to see one last week, so hopefully this will answer your question.
Hi everybody, Inspired 5 is back with an American football special. So we're going to talk you through what we're going to do. We're going to start with a little run on the spot, and in American football, throwing and catching, scoring points, and that's what we're going to do today. So guys, I think we're winning. Now we've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well done. Okay. And score. 2 more times.
I just realised I've got the wrong tag on it. It's not a sports day, it's American football. But you get the idea. So the sports stories are specifically sports, and you exercise to the activities that you do in that sport. The sports day one is a good one. Okay, so that's Inspire 5, just to give you some ideas about the type of things that we do. Logistics, so I mentioned hand sanitizer station in and out of lessons and water breaks, if possible, and interested to hear what kind of PPE schools have got in place in terms of hand sanitizers, wipes, etc., etc.? Do you have the capacity to wipe down cricket bats, rounders bats at the end of each child using that piece of equipment? Obviously, if you do, then that's going to limit the danger even further. But as a minimum, wiping equipment down at the end of the session is really important. Even if that group has that set piece of equipment, I think it's still vital that we do wipe it down just to keep everything as hygienic as we can. It goes without saying, but outdoor PE, as and when we can, really, and we've been so fortunate with the weather during the lockdown and during the pandemic. Hopefully, long may it continues, and PE lessons can be delivered outside for the rest of the term. Even if it's a bit drizzly, I think just get children outside as and when we can, spend enough time indoors, even if they get a bit wet. So yeah, that's an easy one. And I've already mentioned about breaking the groups down a bit further if possible. I know that might not be practical in some scenarios, but if it is possible, then I would recommend doing it, especially for EYFS and year ones. I know at least 2 or 3 of our schools that actually deliver their PE in groups of 15, so they can get a bit higher quality PE lessons. So an example that might be worth thinking about. Okay, equipment. So this is, Ollie, you asked the question. Oh no, sorry, Ollie, yours was about no equipment PE lessons. So we'll touch on that in a couple of slides. So this slide is about how best to use that equipment. So allocating a group of 15 children that's been designated into that bubble with their teacher and teaching assistant, if they've got the staff, if you've got the staff. So could you have a set piece of equipment, a set equipment box, crate, bag, whatever it might be, for every group, every class, every group? And then that obviously limits the amount of children that will come into contact with that equipment, and to keep that danger down to a minimum. And I've just listed a few things there that I feel with this equipment in there, you'd still be able to deliver some fun activities in those PE lessons. So tennis balls, a football, tennis rackets. So you're basically splitting the PE shed into different classes and splitting everything up. So that's one option, that every group has a different allocation of kit. If the phased return of other year groups happens over the coming weeks, then that might need to be addressed, and it might need to be, and obviously the government guidance will change as well, because there's no way that you can have groups of 15 if the whole school's back in the same number of classes that were there previously. So that guidance might change, and it might then be that equipment pack becomes that whole class of 30, let's say, that equipment pack for that class. So that's one option. You are limited then to using that equipment and trying to be creative to what games you can deliver. Another option, which we've discussed with some of our schools to keep it interesting, and I like this, and I think it is safe, is a rotation of kit. So you create a kit pack, but it stays with that group for a period of time. So if it's 2 to 3 weeks, a group might be doing tennis, for instance. Another group might be doing like rounders type activities. Another group might be doing cricket type activities. You might have another group that's doing athletics. So straight away then you've got different sports, different activities that are being done. And then after those 2 to 3 weeks, you can do a deep clean of the equipment, and then it rotates around to the next class. So there's a bit more work involved with the cleaning, and a bit more of a deep clean at the end of that cycle, that rotation. But I think that's a way of still delivering perhaps a more comprehensive PE lesson and doing some more fun activities that are a bit more sports specific potentially. But as I said, we'll give some examples of specific activities later, and you can then judge which you feel you could deliver with group kit, with rotation of kit, or if you want to just stick to no kit to keep it super safe, which again is understandable, then by all means that's an option as well. I don't know if you want to add to that, Marcus.
No, I've been busy answering questions.
I bet there's a lot of questions. Who is this guy? What is he talking about? So yeah, just to add to this before moving on, the possibility of wiping handles down after each child uses it is not recommended necessarily in the government guidance, although it kind of did say if equipment can be cleaned, then it can be shared. I know there's a big grey area with like sharing a tennis ball and a football potentially. But within that bubble, if children are sharing colouring pencils and things like that, I don't see it as any different to using the same bat or tennis ball. So it might be a bit contrarian with that train of thought, but I think it's doable. Okay, activities. So Ollie, hopefully this will answer your question around activities with no equipment. So just to go through these, and I'll race through these. Obviously, you can read them through at your own leisure tomorrow. So races, really easy one. Don't use every lane. Maybe skip a lane, so you've got that spacing between the children. I think you probably still could do relays, but rather than obviously passing a baton or high-fiving somebody, which would be sort of traditional, it could be some other stimulus. So it could be that you say something to your partner, or that they have to jump on a spot and then the next person runs. So again, just be creative. There are ways that we can still do relay races, especially for primary school children. They love racing. They love being in the outdoors doing that type of thing. And then jumps, so athletics, jump, so long jump, triple jump, that type of thing. Again, no equipment needed for that. You can use a tape measure, but the teacher can be in control of that. Or if you are going to go down the route of sort of sharing equipment, then you could incorporate the leaders that Marcus mentioned earlier. And I think I've got a bit more detail in that later. Warm-up games, I'm not going to go through loads of warm-up games, but the bean game, for example, different types of beans, washing machine game, all those games can be done in a space rather than actually running around the whole field or playground. Dance, again, everybody gets an allocated space. You can just copy something off the board. Again, our Inspired 5 could be an example for that. HIIT workouts and circuits, again, allocated space. Print out some laminated sheets potentially to guide the children on what they're doing. And then Marcus mentioned about chalk, which I think is going to be a huge asset for the 7 weeks in the summer term, to create their own games, potentially own targets, own types of activity, different movements, etc., etc. The children, and to be honest, if they're out there drawing and exercising at the same time, that's part that they need to do. It's not necessarily a PE lesson, but they are going to be active. Inspired Playgrounds is one of our other projects, and I just thought I'd show you this video because whilst I know that not everybody's going to have an Inspired Playground, the principles of this are relevant, and we actually used to chalk. So yeah, we actually used to chalk those markings out back in the early days. It used to take a while. So that it could be an option. So the stations, and I'll show you some pictures in a second, but essentially it's circuits. It's really simple to use activities, speed ladders that you saw there, SAQ stations, jumping activities, Foursquare, which I'll go into depth in a few later slides. But the principle is, we've got 5 stations, but you can have as many or as few as you want. But those stations dotted around the playground, again, they could be chalked out, they could be explained with laminated sheets potentially, that every class can have access to their own, again, to limiting the contact with those sheets. Hopefully that video explained it in a bit more detail. I'll show you some pictures as to the type of things that I'm getting at. We didn't design them with social distancing in mind, clearly, but quite a number of our schools in Somerset use inspired playgrounds, and our coaches have been using them a lot. The feedback we've had over the past few weeks are that it kind of naturally separates the children into smaller groups. And if you have that group of 15 and you have 5 stations or more, you're instantly spreading those children out into spaces so that they are socially distanced, or as close to socially distanced as we can be. And then Inspired 5 that I've already mentioned, YouTube again, Mr. Wicks, Joe Wicks, those are all examples of ways to do physical activity without any equipment. I don't know if you want to add any more, Marcus, that I've missed.
Only probably going back many years ago now. Again, not a social distancing project, but when I was over in America football coaching, I come up with a Footworks program, which essentially was a technical program for children, soccer or football as we call it, and that had one child, one ball, and 4 cones. So essentially the whole project was delivered in a 1 meter square. So again, looking at kind of social distancing, it lends itself really, really well. So for an example, those 1 meter squares from 4 cones can be set out pre-PE lessons or at the start of the day. They obviously can be spread out in different areas on the playground or the field. And essentially all of the activities are done within that 1 meter square. So in a football capacity, it may well be dribbling around the square, using the cones as defenders to try tricks and turns, using 2 cones, corner cones for a figure of 8 dribble, trying to juggle the ball or do toe taps within that 1 meter square. But it also leans itself quite nicely into things like hockey, so technical dribbling activities with hockey, and also basketball as well. Obviously tennis skills, but essentially that 1 meter square is that child's square to work in. And again, at the ends of the slides, there'll be our contact details, and I know Ben will send out a follow-up email. I'm more than happy to, if anyone wants a phone conversation with regard to that project and kind of ideas in how you could implement that, more than happy to pick up the phone and discuss further. But it just lends itself really well to kind of where we're at the moment, and actually those 1 meter squares means that you can kind of get a really good session into your PE. People have different amounts of equipment, but it can be quite intense. But also, essentially, those 1 meter squares are obviously spreading the children out effectively as well.
Yeah, great idea. Yeah, here we go. So this is what an inspired playground looks like. So again, I know you're not all going to have inspired playgrounds, but the principles, hopefully you could transfer and you could do something similar, either with chalk or with laminates. Chalk, if it rains, can be quite painful to then do it again the following day. But this is an inspired playground. So as you can see, we did a morning work. This is our first ever morning workout 3 years ago with parents and their children. As you can see, it's probably about 20 plus people there, all relatively socially distanced apart. So it does lend itself, that circuit work does lend itself, and that's what it looks like from a bird's eye view. And then, as you can see, it's just some ideas on spots there that you don't need spots to do. You could easily use cones instead, but reaction games, and you can see everybody's spaced out sufficiently there. Okay, equipment. So my interpretation of those guidelines, again, it might be a little bit contrarian, but I stand by it, is that we can incorporate equipment if it is safe to do so. And I think preparation is the key. So I mentioned some examples of that rotation system, or having that allocation of kit that belongs to that group or that class, however you want to term it. So cricket and rounders, I feel, is a good one that can be delivered socially distanced. So be clear that one field, I think you need to be transparent, and we certainly do as well with the children that we teach, that these are the rules, and this is the way that we're going to play this game. It will be really fun, but if we can't stick to the socially distanced principles, then unfortunately we're going to have to go back to using no equipment. So I think you can make the call on whether you think this is appropriate for your school or not. I know that our coaches will be doing this in their schools, and we've had dialogue with the schools that we work in about delivering these types of activities. So one fielder gets the ball. And you could even go as far as, if it does go in between two people, that the teacher calls out who it goes to, or the children need to use their common sense, and whoever's closest to it, whoever's getting there first, the other child takes a backward step. No stumping of bases. The ball always returns to the bowler, which for ease is probably easier for younger ones if it's the teacher. Again, if you can do it in groups of 7 or 8, then even better. But even if not, then you can almost treat it as a bit more of a relaxed PE lesson. I know not everybody's going to be really involved at every single minute of the PE lesson, but I think that's okay. As I said, if the weather continues, then children won't mind. They're outside, they're breathing the fresh air, and they're enjoying some time with their friends, and they're being competitive in this sort of adapted game. You can allocate field of spaces. If you have hoops, then obviously you could potentially put children in hoops if you wanted to go that far. But it is actually good practice for the children to get used to spaces and fielding spaces and where to be on the cricket pitch or rounders field, whatever you decide to do. I've already mentioned the potential to wipe down bats, etc., after each use, so to limit that danger. But is that practical? It will remain to be seen. Younger ones, again, to differentiate it, I know rounders and cricket is quite a tricky, well, rounders especially with the rules is quite a tricky game. So kick rounders, or crowners as we call it, kick cricket, so using a football, using one of those rubber balls to kick it, same rules apply. For younger ones, rather than running around a whole 4 bases, you could almost do quick cricket but call it rounders. Loads of adapted games out there of how to make rounders and cricket accessible to really young children. So I think that's doable. And again, this time of year is perfect for that type of activity. A bit more static. It's not the most physical of games, but enjoyable, and the children will love it. Like I said, lots of adapted games out there. Marcus already said about having conversations and follow-ups, which we're happy to do, and give any further advice and guidance on any specifics that we've gone through tonight. And then Foursquare or hoop ball. So Foursquare, for those of you that are familiar, it's one of, I don't know if you can see it on these markings. So it's the one top left. So basically 4 squares in one. It's not a game that we created. I think it originated in Canada. You have 1 child in each square, and it's like a volleyball game trying to hit the ball into each other's square. If it bounces twice, you're out, or if you hit it out, you're out. But then a really easy adaptation of that, if you don't have a 4-square court, again, you could chalk it out, or you could just have a hoop and you're playing 1v1 and you're trying to throw the ball, and the other person has to try and catch it before it bounces once or twice, whatever rules you create for whatever year group you're delivering to. So again, if you've got a class of 15, if you've got everybody out there, you only need 7-8 hoops to play this. And it's a really fun game. There's a version of it with almost like a trampoline type net in the middle where you hit the ball onto it. But obviously that's not what we're talking about. But if you've seen that, that's the kind of differentiated younger version of that game. Okay, moving on. So athletics, we've already mentioned, but you can start to incorporate equipment such as battens. Again, if it is just staying within that group, I wouldn't obviously recommend it. You have battens and they get passed around each class, unless you, like I said, after those 2 to 3 weeks, they get deep cleaned. Throwing lessons, again, I wouldn't recommend that you do throwing lesson and then the next class does a throwing lesson. But if one class are doing athletics, they could have that throwing equipment for 2 to 3 weeks. And then, as Marcus mentioned earlier, using the children in your group to add to the lesson. So scorers, leaders, coaches, timers, and then the data that you get from the athletics lesson, whether it's distances, times, points, you could create some kind of points system, maybe do your own little sports day in that group of 15. But you can create data then to take it back into the classroom to create graphs, tables, etc., etc. We're obviously not getting the Tokyo Olympics, so you create your own Olympics. You could have like a medals table in your class that is based on personal bests rather than individual times or scores. You can create teams within your group. So that'd be a really nice thing to do, I think, for the children to have some competition. And athletics this time of year is what the children sort of look forward to, those sports days that I know they won't get this year. So you can maybe create your own. And then finally, I know I've been rambling on for quite a while, my mouth's getting dry, is orienteering. So if you haven't got an orienteering course, quite simple to make one. Laminate the controls, hammer them to a tree or stick them to a wall, wherever. And then just at the end of the usage, just wipe them down, give them a clean, and then they could be accessible to every class to do an orienteering lesson. Again, rather than me giving you examples of how to deliver orienteering specifically, there's lots of resources out there on orienteering lessons for EYFS year 1 up to year 6. It's quite an easy one to deliver. Again, really socially distanced. You can do it individually or as a pair, potentially. And a nice way to just get outside. Marcus, do you want to add anything before I continue my rant?
Yeah, no worries. We had a really interesting question from Laura with regard to our thoughts on teaching gymnastics on individual mats if they're cleaned after each lesson. And it's a really interesting one. I think the element is there, what policy your school take on it, but also obviously the cleaning element after every lesson. And there is that option, obviously, to take mats outside to enable that kind of social distancing to happen. So yeah, with regard to kind of gymnastics and mats, is there an opportunity to deliver that outside? And actually, can those mats be used in other activities and in other sports as well? And again, you know, it'll be something that is up for discussion within your school, but essentially, you know, the key for me is in making sure that equipment is very similar to school desks, really, is cleaned thoroughly, you know, after use. So yeah, there's some options around kind of gymnastics and stuff there as well.
Yeah, I love the idea of doing gymnastics outside. Space is always the biggest killer in gymnastics, that you're in a hall and it'll be hot and sweaty. But yeah, doing gymnastics outside would be amazing. And like Marcus said, I think the same principles apply, that you could potentially do it on a rotation again. So for 2 to 3 weeks, that class does gymnastics. Yes, wipe them down at the end of every lesson, but at the end of those 2 to 3 weeks, you give them a proper deep clean, and then you rotate onto the next activity. I think it would be safe. Like Marcus said, you're going to be governed by your school and what firm measures they take. But I'd like to think that would be a safe practice, something to do. And like you said, if they've got individual mats, then brilliant. And if you can do it outside, you could, then those mats could double up. If you are doing long jump and triple jump, and you don't have a sand pit, then perfect. You can jump onto those mats. You can even chalk the distance on those mats as well to record how far they've jumped. Get the tape measure out. That would be really nice. Sort of continuation on from that as well. Okay, we're sort of coming towards the end, but so here's some more examples of games with equipment. So zone ball. This is one of our coaches, Natasha, who's been delivering this. So every child has a specific zone that they stay in. And they try and pass the ball to each other. I know she's been doing it just with feet to limit hands touching the ball. But again, if it's within that specific group, it could be like a netball type game. In terms of a target, if you've got netball posts or a basketball hoop, great. But obviously for younger ones, it's not going to be realistic. So you could have a goal, 2 cones to make a goal, or a bench on its side if you're indoors. You could have a cone with a ball on top that the children have to try and knock off to score a point. And then just to sort of extend on from that, and this is more for a year 6 game, maybe some year 1s might be able to do this. It's kind of like a snakes and ladders type game, that both teams have a ball and there's no intercepting, there's no tackling or anything like that. You're not allowed to get the ball off the other team, but you have to try and navigate your way almost like you're crossing a river, and every pass is a stepping stone or going up a ladder in like snakes and ladders until you get to the other side and you try and knock that ball off of the cone. If you drop the ball, you then return back, so it will almost be like going down a snake. You return back to the start and then you have to try and cross that river again. It's relatively simple, but obviously you're kind of racing against the other team because they'll be scoring points as well. The extension from that, and what I used to do in the primaries that I delivered in, was then to add in blocking and intercepting. But obviously we don't want to worry about that, but it's still a fun game even without those elements. And then Natasha added another game, so foot golf, create courses if you have enough equipment, cones, etc., to create some golf holes. If you have golf equipment, great. You can almost treat that like a javelin lesson where the children are spaced out enough and they're just almost like a driving range, hitting the ball out, go and cut to collect once everybody's hit, returning back and then hitting again. But you can create courses and have a bit of a masters competition, which again, socially distanced, easy to do. You can even have half the class doing that, half the class doing some races. It doesn't need to be everybody doing the same thing, as long as children are outside and active. Okay, so I thought that was it. Here we go, a few more quickly. Bop It. So hopefully everybody's familiar with the Bop It game, the hand game, the held game. So you could have different colours to make a square. Each colour represents a different movement. You can call out a colour, you go and tap it with their foot or tap it with their hand or bounce a ball by it or dribble a ball around it. Or it could just be a simple reaction game with no equipment that you call out a colour and they race to it and they get to it. Don't even have to touch it. It could just be stand by it and get back to the middle. So it could be set out in a square, it could be set out on a line, like our Spot This game for Inspired Playgrounds. So yeah, reaction game or like a Bop It version. Squares, I won't go into that because Marcus has mentioned his footworks thing, but you could incorporate different equipment, bouncing, dribbling, that type of thing. Children could come up with their own games in those squares as well. Hoop ball that I've already mentioned. And then tennis, which is very equipment specific. If you have the equipment and you are going to go on that rotation basis that one group's doing in tennis, a really easily socially distanced game. You just do some skills for the younger ones, balancing beanbags, dribbling a ball around the playground floor, or trying to hit the ball up a few times, or just balance it and move around the playground. So yeah, lots of different games to play. And then finally, sort of coming to a close, targets for term 6. So for our coaches and what we've said to them is just to try and make it as fun as possible. That's our mantra for the next 7 weeks, or 7 weeks from June. Make those PE lessons as fun, as enjoyable as possible. Be confident, because some of the staff in the schools that we work in won't be, and they will feed off of our confidence that we know we're confident in what we're doing. We've researched it. We're happy that this is safe and this is what we are doing. And then teachers will feel comfortable as well. And also for the teachers, try and enjoy it themselves. Try not to take things too seriously. And I know it's really stressful period, but by that I mean it doesn't matter if the PE lesson isn't the best PE lesson in the world. The most important thing is the children enjoy it and they're out and about and they're fun. And hopefully we can inspire those children to take some of those games into the summer holidays and pursue them sort of beyond primary schools for those year 6s. And then finally, before I go into this, I have added a poll. I don't know how you access it. I've not added one before, but there's a poll at the end of this just to get some feedback on this evening's webinar. Marcus, could you try and just click on it, see if it works?
Yeah, sure.
And it's just got a few questions, and also what type of webinar you'd like us to deliver next, whether it's more of this and more ideas about socially distanced PE. I think there's 4 options on there. One's about coaching companies. And then, so yeah, if you could fill that out, we'd be really grateful. As I said, the slides will be sent out tomorrow, or a downloadable link will be sent out tomorrow. And then how we can help. So this is what we do. As I mentioned, our mission is to create more active schools, to raise physical activity levels in schools. Inspired 5, we are reducing the price to £99, and that will see you through until next academic year, 2021. So if you are interested in that, then please sign up quickly, because that will only that offer will only last until the end of this academic year. And yeah, as I said, and on the Inspired 5, what I didn't mention is when those videos are clicked on, if you have a class allocated to your account, it will automatically add 5 minutes time onto your class's total. So you can actually have a running competition with other classes in the school to see who does the most Inspired 5 minutes. So as I said, that's normally £395, but with everything that's going on, we want schools to be as active as possible. So we're extending it to longer than a year's license until the end of the academic year 2021. to £99. From September, that will go back up to £395. But during this lockdown, during the pandemic, we want to try and get as many children, schools active as possible. And then Inspired Playgrounds, we've actually got the team back on the road installing playgrounds from next week with the guidance changing and the lockdown easing. So we've got our first installation for quite some time. We do have a bit of a backlog, but we are back installing. So again, if you've seen something that you thought, oh, this would be great for our school, perhaps you haven't used up the allocation of sports premium funding yet and you're thinking of ways to spend it, then Inspired Playgrounds is back in action, and we've got lots of slots available over the summer holidays. So if you are interested, either drop us an email or we can get in touch. You can actually book a call via the website as well if you wanted to speak to us. Sports leaders, we've got a free e-learning sport course on our website, so you can go on there and access that. It's a quick guide to start developing sports leaders. Probably not the right time to do that with the Year 6s just leaving, but something to think about for September when you've got some new Year 6s ready to go, or even Year 5, so it doesn't interfere with SAT. And as Marcus kindly said earlier, we're both more than happy to talk to you guys, give any more guidance, any more help. And we're going to do some more webinars in the final weeks of this academic year, and just try and give as much help as we can to coaches, to schools, to teachers, and make people as happy, as confident as possible delivering PE. That's it. If you could fill out that poll, I'm not sure if I'm saying that word right, poll, that would be fantastic. We'd really appreciate the feedback on this evening. Hope you found value in it. As I said, you can book a call through the website. That's the website address there. And we also finally, from me, and I will be quiet, I promise, is we have a private Facebook group. So if you just search Inspired Schools, come and join us in our group where we discuss things like this, PPE, PE lessons, good practice from coaching companies, from our coaches. We'll give examples, we'll put videos in there of what we're doing. Obviously not a huge amount at the moment, but we will be fully functional from September. And yeah, come and join us in there. We welcome new members. We want people to be interactive in that group and help one another, help every school to deliver the best PE provision that we can. We're here to help, and the community is also helping each other, which is great. That's it from me. I will stop talking. Marcus, I don't know if you want to add anything to finish off. Have we got any questions?
No, not a huge amount. There's been quite a few questions. Some would take quite a little while to answer, and more than happy to take time to support in any way I can. I know Ben will obviously send out some information after this webinar, and you know, my number will be on there, my email will be on there. So please feel free to any questions we haven't answered. You know, whether you wanted to book a call in, whether you want to try and have dialogue over email, absolutely fine. But it's pretty apparent that there's a lot of people in similar situations, but probably from a real positive thing, taking their time out to join us. So yeah, any support ongoing that we can give with regard to delivery, ideas. I know there's been some questions around what warm-up games could we potentially implement. So many questions we've probably not answered, but any follow-up, more than happy to be involved in that. So like I said, Ben will kind of get out our information, and more than happy to book calls in, emails, whatever support you feel beneficial, more than happy to try and help with, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Just looking at these questions briefly, Ollie, with regards to girls' PE, yeah, that's a bit of a minefield, and you're right. The drop off in physical activity is huge. As I said, I used to teach secondary school PE, so yeah, the drop off from Key Stage 2 into Key Stage 3 is scary, and I've got 2 daughters myself. So for me, without going into masses of detail, it just relies on really high quality PE provision and really engaging those children whilst they're at primary school, so that they do continue to make those healthy choices. Obviously, body image and the changes that girls go through at that age comes into play. I think from a primary school provision perspective, all we can do is make it accessible, differentiate the lessons so that they're competing against their peers, similar ability groups. And yeah, build confidence, because that can be a big thing with girls that age. And we just do all we can to try and, deliver the best possible PE provision, inspire them so that it just becomes part of their life, right? There's no question that they'll continue to do it because they enjoy it so much. Well, why wouldn't they want to do it? I know that's an easy thing for me to say, but as a short answer, perhaps that is a future webinar. We could probably talk for a whole hour about girls' PE and what we can do. One thing we did, Ollie, and I'll finish on this, is we actually delivered we have done a This Girl Can. I think I might have discussed this on the last webinar, where it was just a girl-specific workout. And that could be, we did it as a one-off, but that could be a girl club that targets a specific group of girls that are inactive or have a high chance of dropping out as they get older. So that's just a few ideas there. Hopefully that's given you some answers. Elise, hi Elise, all the way from Norfolk, one of our inspired playground schools. Cricket and rounds are a no-no. Children will be sharing equipment. Yeah, again, I think different schools are going to be different. I know that some of our schools have said that that's okay if the children have that equipment and that's their equipment and they're the only ones that are using it in that bubble. But yeah, I completely appreciate that some schools will take a different stance on that. Hopefully you can convince. I know you're quite a persuasive person, so you might be able to convince them. And also you're a massive school as well, so I guess sharing equipment is going to be a huge no, as you say. Kids wearing PPE in lessons, I think that's a definite no, Deborah. I think even teachers, as far as I'm aware, aren't allowed to wear PPE. I think that's a no. A bean game and washing machine, Ollie. If you go on our YouTube channel, I've got some short videos of what they are that I've done with my daughter, I think, Izzy. So have a look on there. Bean games, just basically different types of beans, just make them up basically, and they relate to a different type of movement. So jelly bean is all wobbly, chili bean is cold, runner bean is running on the spot. The washing machine game is a gymnastics warm-up that you can do different movements depending on what the washing machine's doing. So fast wash, spin wash, so rotating your arm around, spinning around, slow wash, slow motion. You can put them in the tumble dryer and get creative with it. And then socks is a straight shape. You've got a dress, star shape, trousers, pike, and there's a few other bits. I think there's a piece of clothing for each piece of
Ben, Ollie and I are gonna hook up.
Cool.
So we're gonna spend some time.
Awesome. I think the final one that I will answer is playtimes. Michael, I would just treat playtimes as another PE lesson, to be quite honest. Just another chance for the children to be active. Some of them won't want to be active. And I know that they're talking about staggered break and lunchtime. So allocation of space, if you have the luxury of a big field or playground, different year groups on different spaces. But yeah, get the equipment out. You could just run another PE lesson. I know that teachers have been sort of told that they are with that group for the entire day through break and lunch times as well. So yeah, I would just do that and treat it as an extension of a PE lesson. The more, the better. I think that's it. I hope it's been helpful. And is it from me. Well, take care, everybody, and I'll check the poll results and see what the next webinar is going to be on. If you haven't already done the poll, then please take a look. And like I said, any information you want from us or any interest you have in any of our products at Inspire Schools, please let us know. Other than that, take care, and we hopefully will see you on the next one. Bye-bye. Oh, where do we find the poll? Sorry, I just saw that. The poll should be on there. If you click the polling bit at the bottom. Oh no, launch poll. I've just launched it. Okay, I'm new to this webinar stuff, so I will try and think of a way to send out this poll via email. Oh, some people are doing it now. Thank you very, very much. It's my naivety, first time we've run a poll, so apologies.